This is Robert Mertolacci, the Mindshare Learning Report, Canada's Learning and Technology e-magazine. And welcome to this special edition of This Week in Canadian EdTech. Leader to Leader is how I'm billing it, with a legend in education, Dean Shareski. Dean is an experienced speaker, presenter, author, and we'll talk about that book that has been around a while, and it's about experiencing the joy of life and learning. And he's a teacher, coach, community builder with a demonstrated history in working in the education sector. He started his own podcast, an education. Canadian Education Leadership podcast, which I was honored to be his number 2. I'm not sure why he wasn't number 1. We'll address that. And he's also a senior partnership consultant at the Advanced Learning Partnerships, Inc. Dean, thank you for joining me today.
Hey, Robert, always good to chat with you.
So one of the inspirations in bringing you on today was, I wanted to return the favor, of course, and being on your show was awesome. You've really, elevated the leadership conversation in Canada in education. Pardon the background noise. We do a Thrive Thursday feast, and there are people gathered around here sharing success stories and sharing food. It's always a great thing to do on a Thursday each month here at the Mindshare Workspace, if anyone's ever in the area. But, there are some real challenges today as we, in our world of education, that we're immersed in daily with technology and professional learning. And you've really brought some of the top leaders to have those conversations. And it's about storytelling. And the storytelling that we do, one thing that I came to respect from people like yourself and the Corsa brothers and others who, like Patricia Gartland from West Vancouver, they're out there telling their story about their organizations, etc. And when you share, you learn. And kudos to you for taking a leap of faith, because it's not easy. And you've done a great job at illuminating the leaders and the stories behind what they do and the challenges and opportunities. What's it? How do you feel about that? And what's it been like? What are some of the big aha moments that have impacted your thinking about leadership and learning? Because we push the envelope around innovation on a daily basis, and it's not an easy thing to do in education.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I started the podcast, this specific one, and I've been podcasting for a long time. In one of my episodes, I reunite my former colleagues from the EdTech Posse, which was a podcast that actually launched, I believe, 18 years ago, 2005, if you can believe it. So the whole concept of podcasting has been, and I've dabbled with it. I've had various other shows and iterations and so forth. But this one, kind of began with my own desire to highlight Canadian content, Canadian leaders. There's lots of podcasts that do that. So obviously I'm not trying to, I'm not, doing anything super new. However, I and I think you and I both in our travels hear about Pasi Sahlberg even saying, well, hey, maybe Finland isn't the only place that's doing really well around the world, that Canada actually is pretty high when it comes to achievement and innovation within education. So that was my beginning. Like, let's do this and really to try to capture right across Canada from coast to coast to coast. So I've got folks in there from Maritimes, the West Coast, Northern Canada, and across.
But I have to say, sorry to interject, but the only reason you're able to do that, there aren't too many people that could do that. It's about relationships, and we'll talk about that later. But it's because you have those critical relationships to pick up the phone or an email, and they will give you their time because you built their trust.
Right. And that, yeah, that's certainly a big part that
It's a
has
compliment.
I know, I appreciate it. And it has its own kind of, like, we could talk ad nauseum about how you get there. And I know you're kind of in the process of writing about that and trying to share that. Like, how do you actually do this stuff? So again, I perhaps take that for granted, but yeah, it definitely, I definitely leverage my network and the people that I know. Uh, but, as I've, that's where the curiosity began. And I think where I'm at now, and this has been evident probably the second half. I've launched 31 episodes. I got episode 32 coming out Monday, but probably about halfway through this journey, I realized, and I wrote a blog post about this, really asking the question, who wants to be a leader? Because leadership is not as attractive as it once was, I think. And that's not just in education. We're seeing this in politics. We're seeing this in so many fields where people just like, being the boss, taking on that responsibility just comes with so much, uh, you know, challenges that people generally like, I don't know if it's for me. And so
I wouldn't
part of
disagree
what
with you. I wouldn't disagree with you. And I think I know why, but I'll let you finish because I have a sense
well,
of why.
sure. Yeah. I think there's a number of reasons. I think, but I would say, perhaps the primary reason is just the sort of the added angst and challenges that have, and the lack of trust, perhaps even in our institutions, right? Like, we see the sort of the breakdown of, I look at politics. I look at how politicians just get berated constantly. Everyone, doesn't matter where you are, what side of the aisle you're on, or whatever, somebody's out there just, and of course, because social media, like, they see it, right? Like, these are thoughts that people had, and now, along with the bumper stickers and the tweets and everything else, like, you're just pounded with it. So you have to have this amazing thick skin, thicker than ever, right, to be able to get through. But the people that I have on the show are those who have said, despite that, I'm still excited about the work that I do. I'm still excited about making a difference for kids. I'm still excited about what's next. And so these are the people that are, that are the core of who I'm talking with, and just excited to hear and learn from all those great leaders.
Absolutely, and it's admirable. Yeah, I often get tapped about running for politics in my region, and I've done my leadership coaching. The most important thing to me was coaching my kids, the kids in hockey and soccer, the kids I coached over 15 years, and I would impart my life experiences, lessons, and always finish with do well in school because it gives you options. Parents would get mad at me because their little Johnny was going to make the NHL and school wasn't important. But at the end of the day, it's about perspective and making an impact. The only reason I did it was because I felt I can make an impact. Now, at my juncture in life, I've been our community association president. Would I want to run into politics because of all you're under a microscope and
Yeah,
it's a thankless job. There isn't the respect.
exactly.
There isn't the respect, and we have to ask ourselves why, because the decorum is at its lowest point in our history. I would say, when it comes to leadership and those who embrace social media for the wrong reasons. And I'm not going to mention the person's name, but he's very much in the media today. And people are questioning this very wealthy, innovative idiot at the end of the day because he's leveraging it in the wrong ways. And it's unfortunate because we are all thinking about moving to other platforms to share positive things and positive decorum. Don't take advantage of a platform to to share, evil and divisiveness. And I'm not
Well, and
mentioning the name.
no, I mean, I think we know kind of know where you're going with it, but I also, I mean, part of my call to action, if you will, in a lot of this, and again, I've written a few blog posts about it. It's not just, listen, if we want to encourage good people to become leaders. And I mean, when I was in school division, I would have our central office folks say, hey, I think you should go into this, I think you should take on this role or that role. So people get shoulder tapped all the time. And a lot of people are just saying no. But I think one of the ways in which we can combat this is that us as citizens do a better job of supporting our leaders. So while we continue to ask more and more from our leaders, we need to do a better job of being good citizens. So that means that my urge to write a negative tweet about my local MLA or MP or prime minister, whomever, maybe temper that, right? Because it's just easy to say, what in the world are these people thinking? They're nuts or whatever. And again, I'm not trying to say we don't critique and criticize our leaders. That's part of the job. They know that, and that's part of it, certainly. But the way in which we do that, of course, is so critical, right? To say that, hey, I wonder if there might be a better way of this being solved, but of course, it just is so easy to throw in the vitriol and the really just uh, classless kinds of comments. That's where it hurts. I listen. Nobody likes criticism, but I think we all understand that if there's a role, hey, if I'm leader, I'm open for people to say, and I would encourage everyone to listen to this coming week's podcast with Scott Johnstone. He's associate superintendent of Parkland School Division, and Alberta has this assurance model, which I think is really fascinating, where they are looking to create confidence amongst their stakeholders, parents, whomever, to say we're trying to do their job. And one of the things that Scott said in this podcast is he referenced the I think is it Jimmy Kimmel that does the mean tweets, has celebrity read mean tweets themselves. He said maybe not to that extent, but when people say negative things about that, we actually include that in our annual report. Like, we're open. So it's not
what a great idea. Yeah.
it's not that we don't want to hear from people, but we
No.
want to create an environment where it's a respectful discourse, right? Where people can say, hey, I don't think the school district handled this busing issue well, or whatever it is. And you're saying, okay, let's look at that. Let's either help us try to do it better, or explain to you better why we did it the way we did it. I mean, that's just miles ahead.
No, you
Space.
struck a chord on a very important word you just shared, is respect. You know, mutual respect. I've always embraced that, and I've taught my kids growing up. Treat people how you want to be treated, and unfortunately, social media has lost its way in that regard, because people take liberties to hide behind things and say things and do things that are detrimental and aren't courageous. Courageous leadership is what we need today to get through post COVID and all the challenging things that we're facing in society. Living isn't sustainable in the big cities. People are hurting. The state of well-being in schools between teachers and students is at a crisis. Um, boys, we want to talk about boys and role models and how they're, challenged today. I mean, there's a lot of the environmental challenges. We're dealing with I mean, there are a lot of challenges that we're facing at, at this juncture. The global political ecosystem is sort of whack with what's happening in the Middle East, especially in the Ukraine. Like, you know, so these are learning moments and opportunities to really help kids understand the lay of the land, and um, and and help them garner the skills they need to cope and become resilient future leaders. How do you model? How do you
Yeah.
model today for a kid?
That's the thing, right? So I mentioned that I think one of the things is that we, as those who are being led, or however you want to frame that, need to be better at supporting our leaders, encouraging them, saying, hey, thank you for your work, and all of that stuff. So that's part of it. And then I think the other part of this equation, just to pick up on what you just said, is that leaders model, and that's why I'm trying to elevate and highlight the folks that I have on my podcast, is because I want them to continue to model in very real and authentic ways sort of the joy of their work, right? Like that, like what is it that makes you excited to lead your school district? Like what are those moments? And sometimes that kind of lives in people's heads, and that's great. But I think there needs to be some intention towards a demonstrative way in which others from afar can point to their principal, to their superintendent, and say, I think I'd love to have their job someday. Like, they look like they're having a lot of fun. You talk about Patricia Garland. I think she's one that people look at and say, like, she seems like somebody like, I'd love to do what she does, right? So we have
Chris
those.
Kennedy.
Chris is like that too. I mean, there's lots of people that do it,
Yeah.
but I also think there's a lot of people who feel that way, but they aren't sure, what does that modeling look like? So how do I, and whether it's just by being more present in schools amongst your constituents, whether it's having conversations with people, whether it's like my podcast this week was with Dave Eberwine from Sanet School District, who has a blog,
He's
which
great.
is amazing. Like, that's one way of doing it. And specifically, he wrote about something that he did this summer, which was he learned how to play the guitar for his daughter's wedding and surprised her.
Oh, wow. That's so cool.
He wrote about that in terms of what is it like when you're to learn something, right? Like, we know that we put our kids in situations and our adults in situations, we're asking them to learn something new, and what does that feel like? What does that look like? And so for him to write about that and model that, I feel like if I'm a teacher or a parent or a principal in his school division and I read that, I go, wow, this guy's a really curious person, that he's willing to try something new and explore something and fail and kind of be bad at something for a while, but then get maybe kind of good enough at something. Like, that whole thing to me is like, that's an example of like I think I'd like to have his job one day.
Absolutely.
Like, enjoying it. So I think there's a role for us to do this, but I think if we acknowledge there's a crisis in leadership in general, and each of us play a part, those who are in leadership and those who are supporting their leaders, in trying to change the narrative of leadership in general, that people, that young women and young men say, one day I want to lead something, right? I want to make a difference.
So here's another thought that you sparked, and this is your wheelhouse. What about amplifying the joy in what you do?
Yeah.
In what leaders do? You know, when you're our best performances as individuals, as teams, and I see it amongst our own team, when we're enjoying what we're doing, we thrive.
Absolutely.
And that's your wheelhouse. So what are your thoughts around that notion and that mindset, leaning into that, where leaders are being, trained and mentored, and making that actually part of the learning process and mentorship
Well,
process? I think there's another book in the making here for you, Dean.
yeah.
What I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah. I think, at the end of the day, like, the work that we do in education, we take it serious, and we should, right? It's really serious work, but first of all, then we shouldn't take ourselves too seriously about that. So I think, it's funny when I have conversations with people that we're about to do work with an ALP, like, one of the things we say is like, listen, by the way, we want to have fun. Like, we want to have fun doing this work. So we're going to be launching some work with a school district around some of our generative AI consulting. And we're
Cool.
really excited about that work we do. But when we talked to them, it's like, we're going to have fun doing it. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And we're going to enjoy it. And we're going to enjoy being with one another. I mean, I think one of the things that we all saw coming out of of COVID was, those first few times you got to be together with people again. I was like, man, this is amazing just to sit in the room with somebody. Like, I don't have to do anything fancy or special. Just
Right.
hanging out is a treat and is a delight and is a joy. So not losing sight of that, I think, is a big thing. Making sure that we just decide that and the other thing is again, I think when I think specifically of leaders, I think about uh, some of the ways in which like, I don't know how familiar people are with the show. This hour is 22 minutes, right? It's sort of
Sure.
it's sort of
If
Canada's
they're
version,
Canadian, yeah.
whatever else. But one of
Right.
the things that I love on that show is that when politicians kind of engage with them around, like, well, let's have a little fun here. So I think it was Michelle Rempel did her wine tasting, and then there's somebody from the Liberal government that made fun of something of themselves. Like it's just like that little bit of taste of, like, listen, I do really important, serious work, but I also like to have fun too. Like, just that's like, it builds trust. So it builds trust, I think, with your constituents, to say that, oh, this is a human being that it doesn't just sort of stick to the script all day long and never talk about anything outside of their work. But it also is, from a personal perspective, like, yeah, like it says, like, listen, part of my job's hard, but it's fun too. There's so many fun things we get to do. And so just by smiling at an event, or just, again, and it's not always about silliness. That's not always
Right.
about, but like I said, being in a room together with people and just acknowledging, isn't this awesome that we're together and we're gonna, maybe share a meal at some point too, and have these great conversations, that this is a joyful thing, right? It's fun. And it's fun
Absolutely.
if you and I might even have some ideas that we disagree with. Like,
Absolutely.
I think Malcolm Gladwell says that ideas and dissonance should bring you joy. That all
100%.
they go, gee, I hadn't thought of that, Robert. I didn't.
Yeah.
That's not how
You
I
know,
come up with this, but tell me more.
the notion of being amongst like-minded people is old school mindset, right? You want to be amongst people with divergent views to generate new ideas and innovative thinking. But one of my challenges that I deal with on a regular basis is my wife thinking that I enjoy my life too much. and
Well,
and I try, because we life is too short. We don't know
absolutely.
when it's going to come to an end with all going on, and looking after yourself, and the notion of play. I want to infuse play in the conversation, because I find, and I know this is relatable to you because we share a common interest in a sport, that I don't want to rub it in, but I'm going to be down in Florida as of tomorrow for 4 days.
Nice. Nice.
And so, business and pleasure, I always try to mix the two. And I find
Absolutely.
when I play, whether it's 7 a.m. hockey on a Wednesday morning, or on the golf course, or on my rollerblades, my mind processes, and in the background is solving challenges and thinking of things that I'm processing. It processes in a different way. And when you're in a better mindset and frame of mind, you generate better ideas and outcomes and solutions,
Well,
and it
and we heard
enhances your
those
well-being.
things. We we heard a lot of that during COVID, when people were trying to wrap their head around what does wellness mean. And so we kind of know these things intuitively, and yet there's still a little bit of a lack of execution. And I still hear people say, and I, again, this is sort of one of my trademark uh conversations that I have, is when people talk about how busy they are, and it's like, don't talk about how busy you are, because people don't want to hear that. Like, because I always say, when someone says I'm so busy, like, I don't know how to. Am I supposed to congratulate you? Like, are you telling me that you're so important that you have no time for anything? I guess, or do I feel sorry for you? Like, do I say, oh,
Right.
that's bad, Robert?
That's hilarious. I've
At
never
the end of
thought
the
of it
day,
that way, but it's a good
well, at
point.
the end of the day, nobody really cares. Like,
You,
we're all busy. We all have
yeah,
stuff to do. Like,
it's an excuse or
yeah.
self-importance.
Well, I mean, it's
If
like
we
saying, hey,
started
Robert.
going down, if we went down the list of what we do
Yeah.
on a daily basis, I don't dwell on that. I just do
Well,
it.
and then is it a competition? Robert, you think you're busy. Let me tell you
Yeah,
about my schedule. Like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know what game we're playing. So at the
No,
end of the day, though, I think that's another, like, sort of leadership hack, if you will,
Yeah.
is I always love leaders who, and I had a number of them, whether they were principals or other positions, who like, it didn't matter when I said, "Hey, do you have a minute to talk?" They always like, "Yeah, we can make that work." Like as opposed to like like there was a time for me, I guess is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. They would always say like, "Yeah," like, and maybe it didn't mean they would drop everything for you
Yeah.
right there, but they never made you feel like, "Oh, I don't know how this is going to happen because I'm so swamped." Because
That's
as
right.
soon as you say that to me, now I feel like, "Oh crap, I wish I wouldn't even
Yeah.
asked you
Well,
because you're so
it's
busy."
just like how you ended on this up on my show, is that I was sitting there watching you on LinkedIn live, and it was pretty funny.
Playing, by the way, I was playing, having fun
So
playing,
I'm
not doing a
watching,
very good
and I'm
job of
thinking,
it.
does he realize he's live right now, not saying anything for 2 minutes? And I reached out and you said, I'm going to get you on my show. First of
He
all, I
really,
want to reciprocate, and I want to demonstrate to you how we do this
yeah,
live on LinkedIn. And actually, we're on Twitter and Facebook. So I'm trying to up you. We're across 3 platforms. But
right,
one of my mentors, who taught me balance, was our former president, one of the former presidents of York University, who recruited me to the faculty hockey team back in the day when I was at York. And I was 27, he was 62. Ian McDonald carved time out in his schedule on a Friday. You could not book meetings with him because we played faculty hockey late Friday morning, not
right,
lunch, quite lunchtime. People
right.
took exception to that. But you know what? It really taught me that you need to protect and embrace
Yeah.
the growth mindset and health and well-being. Fast forward 30 years, okay? I'm the elder statesman now. I know I look younger than I am. And he's 92 and just retired playing last season at 92.
Yeah, yeah.
It says a lot. It
Absolutely.
says a lot.
Yeah.
So, we need to ensure that in education, we maintain that balance. What we gave away at our summit, and I'm going to save one for you, a workout shirt with our summit logo, long sleeve shirt, because it's kind of cold up here in Canada this time of year. And we handed them out, and I said to our audience, our delegates, the reason you're getting this shirt is because education leaders tend to be selfless, and teachers, and use this, wear it, and work out and take care of yourself. Whether you walk, run, yoga, gym, weight, whatever, golf,
Hmm.
take care of yourself. Get
Yeah.
kids outside. Get kids outside. Like David Suzuki, I was interviewing him about EdTech, and he swore. He got really mad. And I was like, wow. And he's like, kids got to get outdoors. And he was right. I was thrown back. This was maybe 20 years ago. Kids got to get outdoors. People got to get outdoors. I mean, Saskatchewan, in the middle of winter, outdoors can be pretty.
You still got to do it though. You still got to do
Yeah.
it. People do it. People do it. People do it. And I got to remind myself to be better at it. But yeah, no, listen, a lot of this stuff too, I don't think it's new to people, but boy, do we ever need a lot of reminders, a lot of, because you just get swamped and you get caught up in the challenges of the work. And like you said, people are working so hard, they're trying so hard, this
So
is
hard.
really important work, but you need people, mentors, you need other people to remind you, hey, slow down, slow
But it,
down.
absolutely. But Dean, it comes down to execution. People talk a big game. People think things. You're a doer. You're an executor. You make it happen. How do we? How do we embed that in learning? Like I took consumer studies. I wrote a blog in my next newsletter going out tomorrow about Mr. Everett, an ex Bay Street banker who taught consumer studies and taught us financial literacy. Project based learning was what we were doing
Hmm.
together in the 80s, no, 70s, late 70s. and learning about mortgages and buying a house and buying a car. And he taught us practical things that I took with me beyond school. Like, you know, let's not, you know, be so impressed with the shiny objects of technology all the time. Some of the things we learned in the past are still relevant today. It was financial literacy month this month. This is the last day, and we almost let that slip by. And I got some information going out on that. But let's prepare these kids for life. I know some teachers take exception when you're preparing kids for a career. It's about life. How about
Sure,
life,
sure it is.
right? Like, honestly, these kids have no
Well,
concept, a lot of them, about financial management.
oh, I mean, there's so many aspects of those practical kind of things that again, that's a whole other
Yeah.
potentially a whole other conversation. But I also love the quote that said, adults need to have fun so children will want to grow up,
Ah,
right?
that's a good one.
Like
That's a really good one.
I mean, like, how do you model, like, and that this goes back to, and here's another interesting thing I'm hearing more and more from schools when they're talking about the challenges with recruitment and retention. They're also recognizing that long term they need to be recruiting from within their current schools. So how do I encourage our high school kids to consider a career in education? Well, first of all, if you want to do that, it goes back to what I said before. They got to look at their teachers and say, "Hey, I want to do that job. Like, she's having fun. He's having fun. He really enjoys his work. I would love to be like that one." And I think there are, many people that are in education now who maybe had those people in high school that made them think this might be a wonderful way to spend a life. But
Absolutely.
but
It-
again, right now, it's only happening just because there's a few people that are intention, not, I wouldn't say they're intentionally, but they are exuding that kind of vibe, right, if you will, to their kids. But again, I mean, I know not every teacher's thriving. I understand that. I understand that
yeah.
it's a difficult time to be an educator. I'm not trying to ignore that reality. That said, I always know there's outliers. There's people that, hey, I figured out something, right? And I'm just so curious always about, like, why is it that you love your job? Because I'm hearing so many people are struggling with it, and I'm not discounting that. But what is it you as an outlier are doing differently, or seeing differently? And there's probably a myriad of factors there. But we need to spend a lot more time extracting from those outliers what they're doing well, and getting them to be more explicit in their sharing, so that young people will say, I think education is a career that I'm interested in. Because right now
Absolutely.
it's not happening. And I mean, I know I probably don't have time to go into it, Robert, because
Yeah.
we've been talking for a while. But then this leads to that other thing that we talked about prior to pressing record,
Right.
is that we don't have enough young men thinking about entering the profession. I saw a report the other day. They're calling the University of Vermont Burlington, where Burlington is. They're calling it Girlington, because there
Wow.
are upwards of 75% of new kids entering college are female.
Wow. That's
As I mentioned
disproportionate.
before, the stats in education is atrocious in terms of young men wanting to enter the profession. I was one of these few exceptions that I taught primary when I first started. There weren't
That's cool.
there's and there's almost no men teaching young kids. And
One of my hockey buddies is a Peel District Elementary School teacher, and he loves it. And he said, yeah,
yeah,
he's a rare bird, breed,
I was a rare bird, man. I taught
bird
first
breed.
grade, and I'd go to meet. I mean, there was nobody else doing it. There were a couple that came along after
Right.
me, but oh yeah. So there's a sustainability issue that we have to get serious about in education. Is how do we create more people wanting to enter the profession? And then the next part of that is, how can you create better leaders, right? And
Well,
and more people wanting to
we,
take on leadership roles.
absolutely. And, a couple of things come to mind, in terms of mindset and mentorship. And, you know, painting a picture of the future of school, like our environment here. We shared a Edutopia article recently, 16% uh, improvement on student performance when you have the right environment created,
Right.
was the research they shared. We have our co-op students come in from two of the top performing high schools in Peel and Dufferin Peel here, and they walk in for the first time. They say, "This is such a cool place." How sad is that they don't think school is cool, but this is a cool space. And I
Yeah.
referenced the
Right.
archaic industrial model that still exists in many learning environments and got highly criticized by someone in my last one of my last newsletters. Well, there are pockets of innovation, but there's a lot of moving parts, and you have to create the right environment, the conditions, like your workspace that you have at home.
Yeah.
You create the right space. We need to do that for kids. Some teachers do a great job at that. They use what they got available, but I see more innovation in more out west, maybe because the weather's different on the very west coast. You see pretty cool learning environments. It's possible to do it throughout. It just needs to have, you need to make it a priority. So it's striking a balance on all the elements that really contribute to joyful learning environment, and mindset is a big part of it, but also having the right tools. And we in furniture, and we didn't talk about ed tech much, but hey, it's not all about ed tech all the time. We're leveraging these great tools. Our tool we're using here is StreamYard. I hope you like it. It's what we use OBS, you mentioned off air.
Yeah. That's my kind of
Similar.
video production tool of choice.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think we've covered off a whole series of podcasts that could happen in one with all these topics we're jumping around on. But leader to leader, I thought was a great title for today, and checking in with you, and really showing appreciation for all that you do on a daily basis. And it is about courageous leadership and doing the right thing. And kudos to you for your passion and staying in the game
Yep.
and playing at the top of your game.
Well, thank you. No, it's just such a passion of mine. And I really enjoy helping leaders sort of become all that they can be, if you will. But also really thinking about it more than just supporting individual, like the systemic approach to leadership. Like, how are we going to grow more people in this profession? And it's complicated, it's complex. But the wonderful thing, Robert, you and I both share is that we just know so many really cool and great people across
Yeah,
Canada and beyond that are just doing this work. We have so many, and I think it's people like us that are tasked with being the narrative champions for some of these
right,
people, because they're busy doing the work. You and I
right.
kind of get to watch from the sidelines somewhat. But I think the role that we play in highlighting, listen, people, don't forget, there's people doing really, really good work. As much as the media and maybe the public sometimes can hit educators pretty hard and have a lot of harsh things. We know different. We know that no, you don't understand. There's people just really doing great work. Maybe you don't know about it, but they are. Just believe me, they are. And you spend time with these people, you spend time in the schools, and you're just in awe. You're just in awe of what people are doing. And they need to be reminded of that. And they need to, the word has to get spread so that those in their own community and around them can say, oh yeah, hey, we could do that too. So
And
that's
you
like,
absolutely, and you hit on a really important point. It's the storytelling. It's sharing those success stories that are happening within the confines of the school district and the walls of the schools. And perhaps we don't do a good enough job across the country in sharing. And I'll share with you what one of the school district directors did in Ontario. He hired two PR people, additional people, to go out and garner the stories from the schools and share
yeah,
them.
wow, that's great.
And that is a secret to their success in how they're thriving, and I would encourage others to do the same, because we don't hear enough of those stories that are happening, and every day there's a success story in a
Absolutely.
school. So
Yeah,
there's no shortage of it, but you need the people to be sharing. Not every director, superintendent has the time or the inclination to be on social media,
for sure.
right?
Yeah, and
So
that's just the way it is. So I don't criticize people for not.
no,
But if you're not, I think to your point, then you need to have somebody else helping you to do it, because the concept of sharing, the concept of, and again, PR is one thing, um, but there's also just a genuine desire to help each other, right? Is to say,
right,
like, listen, I don't know if we've got it all figured out, but we're doing some interesting work in this area, and others should know about it, because they might say, oh, help me learn more, because we're in the early stages of whatever this is, or would love to talk to you more. So again, and that's, I know, Robert, that's both you and I, our joys in connecting people, right? Like, there's
absolutely,
nothing more rewarding than finding people that we know that don't know each other, and saying, you guys need to meet and talk, and you watch those relationships form, and you feel a little bit of pride that you had a little role in bringing those together. So that,
absolutely. Well, Dean Shareski, with that, I think we're going to put a wrap to this, because I know you're super busy. And
no,
so,
I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm not busy. I'm never busy, Robert.
no,
Never
never
busy.
too busy to talk to you
I got stuff to do,
either.
but I'm not busy. I got
No,
things to do, but I'm not busy.
I was tongue in cheek, tongue
I
in
know you.
cheek. Well, with that, Dean Shareski, Advanced Learning Partnerships, founder of the Canadian Education Leadership Podcast. Did I get that right?
Sure. Most of it.
Okay. We'll look forward to connecting again in the not too
Yeah.
distant future. Always a pleasure. Thank you
Yeah.
for all that you do. My name is Robert Merlanche, the Mindshare Learning Report. Be sure to check out www.mindshare Learning to get your latest issue. And until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and keep the learning curve steep.